So a lot of the ideas for my videos come from just observing different events and then synthesizing, putting things together and realizing that there are connections, seeing the big picture. So what I'm going to talk about today is in some way it's connected to this pretty famous book called The Prince by Machiavelli. One of these classic texts. It's not very thick, definitely well worth a read, because I think the powers that shouldn't be have read these books and they've been influenced by these books. So that means that if you want to understand their strategies, then this is essential reading. So I'm going to be making links from this book to stuff like the rubber boat people, to stuff like it's in the news, wasn't it? An event, and then problem, reaction, solution. And now talking the BBC, the MPs are saying, oh, maybe we need airport style security at train stations. And then the final thing that I suppose it was last week I was watching this I found this on YouTube, and it was about the history of the civil war in Yugoslavia in the early 1990s, and maybe that's where I'll start this off. So back in the early 90s, I was in my 20s, and back then I suppose I was kind of more preoccupied with just living my life, really. I wasn't as awake as I am now, but it really was actually pretty grisly. Now, the thing about Yugoslavia was that it was, I suppose you could call it was a multicultural country. In fact, you could say that the country itself, former Yugoslavia, was a construct, because you had Slovenians at the top of Yugoslavia, then you had Croatians, they're predominantly Catholic people, then you had Bosnia-Herzegovina, quite a lot of Muslims there, and then at the bottom of Yugoslavia you had Serbia. Now the thing was, there was some Serbian towns in Croatia, and there was also some Muslim towns in areas that the Serbs wanted to kind of colonize. So when Yugoslavia kind of disintegrated and broke up, there was a massive civil war, and basically what happened was that the Serbs, they shelled a place that they wanted to take over, and then the next thing that they did was that they sent in militia to just basically ethnically cleanse people that they didn't want there. And these militia people were quite often criminals who they'd released from jail. And it was just, this documentary that I watched, it was absolutely gruesome, and it made me think back to 2020 and what human beings are capable of. They're capable of, NPC normies. They have no moral compass. They'll do what they're told to do. And you should never underestimate the power of a normie to do acts of evil. That's just, and what happened there was absolutely terrible. So you then start thinking, don't you, about the rubber boat people in England. Could they be here to perform a similar function, to do some ethnic cleansing? Now the thing is, we're not probably at that stage yet, but if you think about places like London, you could actually get a similar situation to what happened in Yugoslavia, where particular towns might declare their independence and become some sort of a religious theocracy, and those people might decide that other people who don't follow their religion don't belong there, and they need to be ethnically cleansed. And you know, the people that they've got in hotels, who the rubber boat people, that's what they might be here for. Obviously the state would arm them as well, give them the weapons. And you know, this kind of fits in, doesn't it, with the age profile. And a lot of the people that they brought over have come from countries that were wrecked by the British Army, so they might have a motivation to want to take part in kind of ethnic cleansing. So, like, are we there? That is, are we there yet? I would say no, we're not. Quite interesting, as I say, when I went to Croydon, there was it was so multicultural, it would be quite difficult to engineer that type of situation. Whereas in former Yugoslavia, you had much smaller groups who were prepared to murder each other as part of a turf war. Against that, you know, in the world of politics, you've got another trend, though, that I can see why they want to do it now, which is pushing autonomy to cities, giving more power to mayors. You know, you can imagine that in the future, if you had a particular city and they voted for, let's call it what it would be, a theocracy, then, you know, that would be more likely to result in this type of nightmare situation. And as I say, watching this documentary about Yugoslavia, the thing that was kind of really shocking was that they interviewed people who used to live next to people who, I don't know, had a different religion to them, and they all got along okay. But then all of a sudden, they start murdering each other. And that was kind of, you know, and also as well, it wasn't just they were killing sort of fighting age men, it was, they were ethnically cleansing old age pensioners, children, women, just without mercy. Again, you know, for me, it's sort of, you know, you think about, well, how could the NHS GPs, how could they inject people with poison? How, you know, how could the... We now know that just what human beings are actually capable of. That's been a big wake-up call for me since 2020. So are there any positives? Are there any glimmers of hope here? So let's look at what Machiavelli says. So auxiliaries, I suppose you could call mercenaries, rubber boat people, taxis for hire. Auxiliaries may be efficient and useful when it comes to achieving their own ends. So you might have people who want to establish a theocracy, and useful when it comes to achieving their own ends, but they are almost always counterproductive for those who invite them in, so like the globalists in this case, because if they lose, you lose too, and if they win, you're at their mercy. So I think we've seen this before. They've used religiously motivated people, gangsters actually, who fly under kind of fake religious flags. They've been used in places like Afghanistan and Libya, Syria, and basically what often happens is that it either doesn't work, they don't manage to overthrow the regime, or if they do, once it's happened, they go rogue and they stop following your orders. You know, I suppose Afghanistan was the best example of that, and it just all becomes messy, and you can't control or govern this country because the people that you used, your auxiliaries, your mercenaries, just like basically told you to jog on once you armed them, and they overthrew the people that you wanted overthrown. Something that I've noticed actually, again, connecting a dot here, is the use of drones. I have no doubt whatsoever that people like Starmer would use drones against any auxiliaries or mercenaries that he'd installed in the UK for the purposes of destabilizing it. And maybe this is what's going on now in places like Gaza, what's gone on in the past in places like Iraq, was the extensive testing of drones. So you arm the auxiliaries, you arm the mercenaries, you get them to do, you promise them stuff. Oh, we'll give you a theocracy, we'll give you what you want, and then that basically, once they've got rid of the regime you want gone, you then just drone them, you just squash these little bugs once they've outlived their usefulness to you. So if by chance we've got any rubber boat people watching, that's what I would say to you: stop being a useful idiot. Don't think that you're going to get what you want. That these people, they'll use you to achieve their objectives, and then when they're done with you, they'll just get rid of you. They'll drone you. A bit like the Terminator movies, you know, maybe that was a predictive programming. You know, the machines, maybe that's like drones. They'll just get rid of you that way. You don't even need to send any troops in. You can just computer game them into oblivion. So some other good news. Obviously, we had another one of these. I'm not going to say false, right? Because, and then this other word, because it will just get triggered by Al Gore. So we're going to call it a fake flag, yeah? So we had one of these fake flag events yesterday. And people aren't falling for it anymore. I sometimes go on a forum, a web forum, that I think is very useful from my point of view, because it gives me an insight into the mindset of the typical UK normie. And what I'm seeing is that they're understanding more and more that these events are not organic, they're fake flags. And you know, the other thing as well is that they're not even very good at carrying out these fake flag events either. You know, it's just pathetic. You know, again, I was on Twitter and there was tons and tons of people basically talking about how these fake flag events are they normally coincide with training events, don't they? You know, and the training events just are virtually exactly the same as the fake flag that inevitably follows. And then they leave all kind of like numerical clues, don't they? 33 and all. They just can't help themselves. Hubris, the word hubris springs to mind here. But you see, the thing is that people are awakening. People are learning, some faster than others. And, you know, one of the things that they want to achieve, you know, apart from, you know, their problem reaction solution, they need us to call for the digital prison that they want to impose on us. They can't just impose it, they need our permission. They need us to call for it. So this is why they use the fake flag events. So they want some airport style security, for example, at railway stations. So they construct some sort of ridiculous fake flag event. So hopefully, like some morons actually say, oh yeah, we need it. We need airport to keep us safe. So it's all about fear, as you know, isn't it? But the thing is that people are sussing it out. And I think it's very important that we call it out. You know, when you know how they weaponize the term conspiracy theorist? What I think we need to do is to weaponize the fake flag phrase, you know, where the other F is false. We need to start using that, dropping that into conversations with normies. And when they say stuff like, oh, well, the government would never harm its own citizens, we'll just then be prepared to list out a long list of examples of where governments have. lied and murdered their own citizens, so that politicians and the people that appoint the politicians are able to strengthen their power and control. Oh yeah, there was something else as well, another positive. Yeah, of course, we know like the mainstream media is controlled, but what I've come to realise is that much of the alternative mainstream is also controlled. So how can you spot it? Well, these are the ones that actually take the fake flag event and then they start going on about oh, we need to do compulsory deportations, and we, you know, the recommendations are based on getting society to turn against each other, to like along religious grounds basically. So they take the fake flag and they kind of pretend that it's real when it's just, so they end up exposing themselves, because something that is 100% fake flag, that doesn't mean that nobody got killed, by the way. Many fake flags involve innocent people losing their lives, but what makes it a fake flag is that the people that did it are not the same as the people that the government says did it. They're normally mercenaries, auxiliaries, people that have been hired by the government, who will do whatever, you know, take some human life, I don't know, for 10,000 quid. And there are people who are willing to do that. You know, just think again about the NHS GPs. They did something very, very similar. I guess the other thing as well with these fake flags, they're doing it with all sorts of different groups. You know, different groups are being attacked, and then what they want is for us to all turn against each other. And you know, you have this kind of orgy of bloodletting like they had in former Yugoslavia. Now the thing is that if we can talk to normies and NPCs and explain to them what's going on, then this kind of possible outcome where there is a civil war, a bloody civil war, like, you know, Balkanization, Yugoslavia kind of mass killing, becomes a lot less likely, because there isn't that same animosity between groups. Instead, our animosity is more likely to turn towards the corrupt people running our society, who are basically Satanists who belong to the funny handshake gang. I think that the final thing to say, this again a positive, is just how important trust was to these to the satanic club. They only were able to get away with what they got away with for so long because we trusted them. And I think the mistake that they made back in 2020 was that they just pushed the envelope too far, and they ended up waking up a lot of people. So that trust, it's gone. There's a growing proportion of the population who no longer trust politicians, who are beginning to ask more and more questions, and that the genie's out of the bottle. It's game over for these people. So yeah, let's, in our conversations, let's start throwing in the fake flag term whenever we can. So yes, that's all I want to say today. So God bless.